unless there's any objection. Oh. All right, I'll call this special school board meeting to order. It's the Oaks Public School District's special meeting in the conference room and via Zoom on February 23rd at 7 a.m. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our board is meeting today for the purpose of a consultation with Dakota Leadership Solutions, the firm which we've engaged to assist us with our superintendent search. I think our purposes today are to get to know each other a little bit, both us getting to know the folks from Dakota Leadership, as well as them getting to know us, our needs, our desires, and to approve their proposed timeline or amend it to our needs. And with that, I'd like to introduce all of you to Dr. Brian Dukeshire. He and I served on the State Board of Public School Education and Career Tech Education together for 6 years. He was on there a lot longer than I was, but he recently retired last June 30th as the superintendent of the Carrington Public Schools, where you had been for what, 11 years? 12?
14 years.
14 years. With that, you want to say anything else about yourself, your firm, your team, and
Yes.
And fire away.
Yeah. First of all, thank you to the Oaks Public Schools in allowing Dakota Leadership Solutions to work with you and finding your superintendent. The next couple of months is going to be very important for your school district, your students, parents, teachers, and all involved, all your stakeholders. So it's a pleasure to be working with you, and thank you for this opportunity. Just a little bit about our firm. You know, this is our first year in working with school districts. Currently, we're working with 2 other school districts and just helping them find their superintendents. Our membership or our partnership, there's 5 of us working. Myself, I'm like Sonia said, Brian Dukeshire. I was the superintendent of the Carrington School District for the last 14 years. Before that, I was in Wishick for 19 years. And so I've served on different state boards, and some of those were with Sonia. And just let you know a little bit about our other team members. We have some others on Zoom with us. So Mike, can you just give us a little introduction also?
Sure, I'm Mike Bitts, and I'm currently the superintendent of Mandan. This is my 11th year in Mandan. Prior to coming to Mandan, I worked in Hillsboro. I was superintendent there for 11 years. And prior to going to Hillsboro, I was in your neck of the woods. I was a shared superintendent between North Sargent and Gwinner and Milner. Worked closely with Mr. Conklin during those years. That was 96 to 99. I've also been a principal at Emerado, right outside of Grand Forks Air Force Base, and I started my teaching career in Des Lacs, Burlington, right outside of Minot. So kind of been all over North Dakota. I'll turn it over to Paul.
My name's Paul Stremick. Born and raised in Walhalla, North Dakota, and I live there now. I'm retired superintendent after 31 years in education. Was a superintendent in North Border, which is part of Walhalla, Grafton, and Dickinson. Also served on the Education Standards and Practices Board, and looking forward to working with your school district. Nancy?
Good morning. I am traveling, so I am going to be visiting with you via audio instead of face-to-face. But Nancy Bollingberg, I've served superintendent in Pheasant and Bowdoin for the last 12 years. Prior to that, I was principal, and over the 30 years I was in education, I worked exclusively, I guess, with technology, and did a lot of work with your technology coordinator, Mr. Engel, on state boards and whatnot. So thank you for letting us work with you. I'm very excited about it, and helping grow the leadership in this state.
All right, thank you all. And if you don't mind, I didn't warn my board members, but I'll go first. I'd just like to introduce myself and each of our board members to introduce themselves to you so that you have a little bit of an idea of who we are and where we are in our school board service. And interestingly, every one of us was educated and grew up and was educated here at Oaks Public Schools and graduated. Am I right? We all graduated from Oaks Public Schools, and I have always they're all wonderful board members, but I've always also valued having different perspectives from people who grew up and were educated somewhere else, because we sometimes get the idea that, well, that's the way everybody does it because it's the only way we know. But with that, I'm Sonia Meal. I'm in my third year of my third 3-year term, and so my term ends on June 30th, or at the end of this school year, and I do intend to run for a 4th term. I've served as president. This is my 7th year, and should I be reelected and serve with the next superintendent, it will be my 4th superintendent, because my first year was with Mr. Conklin. We knew he was going to retire. I was on the board when we hired Josh Johnson, who served with us for 3 years. And then was on the board, of course, again, when we hired Mr. Steinhoff, now Dr. Steinhoff. And so I think that I will be the first ever school board member in the history of Oaks Public Schools to have served with 4 superintendents, because we've had 8 since we will have, this will be our 8th one since 1932 or 34, which is about when my dad was born, and he too was raised here and served on the school board when I was in school. So that's my story. I have 2 sons. One graduated in 2015 and one will graduate in May. So after this year, I will no longer have the eyes and ears in the school from the perspective of a student. Who's my next senior? You 2 board members? Why don't you go? Go ahead, Robert. It doesn't have to be as long as what I said.
My name is Robert Thorpe. I'm from the Oaks area here. I'm a local farmer. I've been on the school board. This is my 2nd term, first year in my 2nd term. I have 2 children in the district, a junior high and an elementary.
My name is Sheila Nagel. I graduated from Oaks High, as Sonia had stated. This is my 4th year on the board, 2nd term. I have twin boys, 7th graders, and I work in public accounting in Oaks.
My name is Bill Schmitz. I'm in my 3rd year of my 1st term. Graduate Oaks like everyone else here. 5 kids, 2 through the district, a junior, 8th grade, 6th grade. So yeah, it's gonna be an interesting search.
And Ryan.
Ryan Rosendahl, again, graduated here. My wife and I both did. A local business owner. This is my 2nd year of my 1st term on the board. I have 3 children in school, 7th grade, 4th grade, kindergarten.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. We appreciate you joining us at this early meeting. This is the typical time that we meet. It's the time that works for our board members, and we like to be out of here by 8 or 8:30. So it's great for keeping meetings short, but sometimes short meetings aren't the best. But with that, would you like to lead us through your timeline and or ask any questions you would like to know from us as far as what our expectations are, how you would guide us in this process?
Well, Sonia, why don't we just go through the draft timeline, and as we go through the timeline, we can talk specifics when we get down to those timeline items. And does everybody have a draft timeline in front of them?
We do. Thank you.
So, today we're looking at just our first meeting, and then once we approve this timeline, we can try to get the information out to the on the web and through job service, different places like that. So you know, we're thinking about coming down to Oaks and trying to meet with the stakeholders of your school district on March 5th. And that's just a proposed date. I know also you have March 9th on there. And what's your thoughts on those two timelines? I know one is the Friday of a state tournament, and that could impact things too.
We could know that as early as tonight. That March 5th is a state girls basketball tournament. And March 9th is, looking at the school calendar, March 9th is our regular scheduled monthly board meeting. Again, that would be at 7 a.m. But it is the second day of boys district regional tournaments, which I hope to and expect to be at. My reaction is March 5th would be great unless we end up at state girls basketball, but we will know that quite soon.
Okay,
Any
so
other thoughts? I think March 5th will be fine tentatively unless we go, we end up at state girls basketball, and then we'll have to refigure.
and a little bit of specifics about that particular day then. You know, what we've done with in other situations, we could come in sometime around noon and start meeting with stakeholders from teachers to classified personnel to and end with your community. And, you know, with that, we need some help from your administration on trying to set up some of those meetings.
Okay, we do have here April Herring, our business manager. I'm sorry I neglected to introduce her. You've been working with her, Brian, to gather information. I also have both of our principals, Mr. Beta, our high school principal, Mrs. Sell, our elementary principal, and Carrie Haugen, our senior administrative assistant, who has been here for, well, if you count kindergarten, it's been 45 years. 45 yeah, years. Almost nonstop. So well, I guess if any of you have thoughts as to, you know, how would March 5th work? I'm not seeing anything else on the school calendar other than what we've already talked about. It is a Friday, whether people will be not inclined to come to late afternoon, evening meetings on a Friday. Yet we do need to have some non-work time for the public, I think, to be able to meet. You are also offering, or you will also offer online survey question option to gather information. And the primary goal of the visit is to gather information about expectations and what the desired characteristics are of the next superintendent. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. So with that, we would come in and we could go into a couple different rooms. Our members would speak with small groups at that time, gather information, get their input on the characteristics, what they're looking for in their next superintendent. With that, we also offer online option for people that cannot attend, or even for the people that do attend, if they want to go online, they can submit their comments online also.
Okay, and is it your desire to meet with the entire board in person on that day as well?
That's an option, yes. I mean, we're meeting right now, but we could have a short meeting also. We could do that after we gather input or before we gather that input that day.
Okay, and board members, what are your thoughts? I mean, we've been having a lot of special meetings, and I know this is important, but if there's no specific purpose that the board needs to meet and act upon something, perhaps we could make ourselves a part of some of the various, you know, some of the rooms gathering information and come at our, you know, at our convenience. If there's a lunchtime option, late afternoon option, maybe we could join in that manner.
Yeah, and during the initial meetings, you know, I think we're really interested in getting input from the teachers, the classified personnel, all employees of the school district, and then the community meeting. Obviously, we wanted to get input from the parents and other community members. So at that time, if board members want to show up at that time, that would probably be a better time than when we're meeting with employees.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Then we will not plan a specific special school board meeting on that day. And we would be welcome to attend more of a public parent type meeting, since we all fit that category.
And then I'll work with April and some of your administrators and work setting up some of those separate rooms and the logistics of those meetings.
Okay. All right. And then in the alternative, we could consider March 9th if weather or activity prevents us from meeting on the 5th. All right.
Team members, did you have any other comments or questions?
I was just going to say that we'll take the feedback that we get from those groups and we'll give it back to you so that you can see what's important to your teachers, what's important to your community, what's important to your classified staff. And then we'll survey you as a board too, individually, and find out what's important to you, so you can see if you're on the same page and what you're thinking, whether that matches what your community and teachers and classified staff think.
Good. Thank you.
And also within that survey, the students can go on and fill out that survey also. They just have to indicate that there's a student. Also within that online survey, we ask everybody's name and email. So we want to make sure that this person's connected with the Oak School District somehow.
And then I think you told me when we were visiting that you do collect that information to verify that they are affiliated with our district, but then you do not necessarily share their name
Correct.
tied to their comment with anyone here at the district, including our board. And you would assure them of that in advance so that they feel confident that they can speak candidly or share information candidly.
You get to see the comments, but not the names.
Very good. All right. Any other questions or comments on that process? All right, moving on then. When we have these 35 exceptionally qualified applicants that you've vetted, the position closes on April 2nd. And when Brian and I first talked, we talked about, you know, the Easter being sort of in the middle of this process. He suggested that this should be a 5 to 6 week process. And, you know, then we were at Easter. So do we want to finish before Easter, after Easter? And this is just a proposal. So that seems like a reasonable hard break to me, that and then we do our hard work after that.
So the timeline looks good there, April 2nd, and then screen applicants on the 5th.
My only proposal would be if we could do more the week of April 5th instead of the 12th through the 14th. I'm a farmer, so once getting close to April 14th is planting time, and if I'm in a meeting when I should be planting, I can't give my full attention to what I should be doing when I should be doing something else. So.
Okay, so if we open this position tomorrow, you think we need to go all the way to April 2nd to close the position, or could we back it up to March 26th, earlier in the week? So could we be interviewing the week after Easter, April 5th through 9th, and make our decision then? Would that be preferable?
Well, yeah, the more that we could do the first week of April would be better than the second.
Thoughts? Yes, we have a farmer and we have a CPA. But really, would April 12th through the 14th be any better for you, Sheila?
No, I'll work around it. I'm fine.
Okay.
This is important.
Bill or Ryan, you're
I'm more in March, so I'm good.
okay.
Earlier is better for me.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so you want to move that timeline up a little bit?
Is that what would be wrong with that? Does that give us adequate time? I mean, I think the education world knows that we are seeking a superintendent, and maybe sooner is, you know, get the deadline sooner, get people in.
Okay.
that fine? So we're gonna say the deadline then would be March the 26th, a whole week before?
All right?
And then we would be screening the week of March 29th. I mean, we can, the 29th, 30th, I don't know how, you will be screening and vetting these applicants all the while they're coming in, right? You're not just gonna wait till the last day.
Well, on the 29th or shortly thereafter, or the 26th, excuse me, we're going to send you a PDF with all the applicants. And then we'll come down, or correct me if I'm wrong, will we send them that day or will we send them the day that we come down?
Send them before.
Yeah, we'll send them before. And then we'll come down whenever you guys want to have your special meeting. So one of us or two of us will be there. And what we'll do is we'll go through each applicant and give you a short sentence or two, statement or two on each applicant. And then we'll give you the recommendation of who we believe you should probably consider interviewing. And you can add or delete from that also.
And that'll be an executive session. We'll give you the list of, and I'm just going to use a round number. These are the 10 people who applied. These are the 3 or 4 that we're recommending to interview, but you guys can overrule us. If there's somebody that we don't have on the list that you are able to look at their packet and you like it, you can certainly add them in. We'll give you our rationale of this. This is why we picked these 3 or 4, but ultimately you get to make the decision of who you interview.
Tell me what will be the entirety of the packet, every single thing that they've sent to you, which includes what documents? What are we going to be looking at in that packet?
If I may, you'll be looking at their resume, their cover letter, their letters of recommendation, their licenses, a copy of their license, so you can see they have a license, and their transcripts, and just basically everything we get. We're going to give you a PDF of all of that for you to look through, just so that you have access to everything.
So it will be every document that you've seen from them, and at that point, will you have done any background checking?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Well, as people come in, we meet weekly as a group, and we kind of divide up the work. Like, does anybody know this person? Who do you know in that area? Who can we check with? And we do all that prior to that time. We could get a late applicant that day, but generally people call us before they're going to dump an application in on the last day.
Okay, so we're looking for a date for that executive session, which could be a couple of hours going through. Well, we will already have seen them and can go through them in advance, but certainly an hour to do a good job of having robust discussion about these applicants.
Yes.
And so I don't know if it will be a 7 a.m. meeting, but 7 a.m. Mondays are not, as Bill pointed out, I'm not a big fan of 7 a.m. on Monday meetings, but
not a big fan of Mondays.
yeah, Mondays are just bad anyway. So are we, but I'm certainly available. Look, well, I'm just getting home from a vacation on the previous day. So I think, I hope anyway, I'm thinking that our day might be Tuesday, the 30th. Does that seem reasonable for everyone? And it may be a 7 a.m., maybe we do a noon, we'll figure that out. But I would say it would be most likely to be a 7 a.m. meeting like we typically do. So March 30th is our proposed date for that executive session vetting the applicants meeting.
And that is when we would provide you our recommendation. We will not do that ahead of time so that when you review them, we don't sway your opinion as you're reviewing the candidates.
Okay. And so then we'd be moving the interview week up to the week after Easter, the 5th through the interview and finalizing the interviewing and decision-making and negotiation up to the week of the 5th through the 9th of April. Is that right?
And what we'll do is when you close on the 26th, we're going to go through, we're going to know that these are the 3 or 4 people we're recommending for interviews. We're probably going to give them a call and say, we're not guaranteeing you an interview, but please keep this date and this date open, just so that they're able to come on a date that works for you. If they don't get an interview and you decide not to interview them, we can certainly tell them, you know, I'm sorry, they chose not to interview you, you're not, but at least they keep those dates free and they're available.
I'd like to talk a little bit about interviews. Both of the previous searches that I've been involved in and we interviewed, I think both times we interviewed 4 applicants. And in both cases, we devoted an entire day to each individual applicant. We interviewed on a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday. The applicants' time in Oaks included an on-site interview, a tour of the school, a tour of the community, a lunch. I'm interested in hearing, let's see, how many of you have been involved in a search before? None of you? Am I the only one? Mm-hmm. Okay, so none of these people were on the board when we hired even Craig. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about spending a whole day with each of 3 or 4 candidates as opposed to interviewing 1 or 2 candidates per day and devoting perhaps, you know, 2 to 3 hours or a single meeting, and then someone else gives them the tour of the community. What are your thoughts? What would you suggest, Mike or Brian?
We've talked a little bit about this. You and I, we've talked, but our group has also talked, and some of us have been on the other side of that, those all-day interviews, and they do get a little bit long for the applicant. And also it does get a little bit long for all involved, you as a board, or if you're meeting with them early and then they go through different tours and then you come back and meet with them, it gets to be a long day. That's been a model that's been used, but some schools are adjusting that model a little bit to shorten that up. And maybe you could probably try to shorten that up a little bit and try to get 2 interviews in a day and just take 2 days to interview. Okay.
I think I mentioned when we met last Tuesday, I had visited with Dr. Steve Johnson, the superintendent at Lisbon. Of course, they're going through this right now. And their board, knowing he was going to retire, they hired him as part of his last year's contract. One of his jobs was to help them find his successor. And they have been using this full day interview model, and he liked that. He thought that was important, that to have the interview be an entire family event for that, for each applicant. On the other hand, I know when Craig interviewed in Huron, he had already gone down and visited sometime before that with his wife and his family, spent some time in the community, spent some time in the school a month or more before the interview. And their interview process included 4 or 5 different committees. One was the board, one was staff, one was community. And I think he went through 4 or 5 1-hour interviews in a single day at the same time as the other applicants. They were kind of on a carousel, and it was grueling, I think. And so, you know, those are 2 different options. And then I think what Brian is suggesting for us is do an interview that lasts for an hour or 2, you know, hour and a half, and send the candidate on his way, maybe his or her way, maybe with another staff or community member to tour the school, tour the community if they wish. One thing I would say about spending more time with the candidates and having lunch and touring the school is that you get to visit with them in a little more relaxed setting as opposed to simply an interview across the table. But I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are.
I agree with Dr. Dukes here that full day is beyond what I think we need. My opinion, never doing it. I think, yeah, there's a point of, she's an 8 to 5 day. You run out of that personality after a while too. You really not, I like to see 2 a day, just personally.
I like the 2 or 3 hour thing myself.
Okay.
Then having someone else show them around.
I'd like to bring in the chamber, whether it's Kasha or someone, the chamber board, they can interview, get away from us a little bit too, see the town.
That's exactly the model that we used in a different community. We had someone from the chamber show them around town, or one of us from DLS. We could also be involved in a little bit of that. But one other thing is when you interview, you're going to interview in a public meeting. It's a school board meeting, so any of your stakeholders can sit in, from students to parents to teachers to whoever, to see this candidate. So they're going to get a good opportunity to also hear and listen to their philosophies and leadership styles.
So I'm also, the first 2 times I did this, yes, indeed, we were in an open public meeting, but that was years and years ago before everything was on Zoom. So of course it was a public meeting, but only the people who are there, who were physically present, were there. What are your thoughts, and what are your thoughts about adding this virtual option? We're not required to. It's a public meeting held in public, but what are your thoughts about adding a Zoom component?
I like the idea, and just because of COVID, and one other thing is you don't know if you're going to have 5 people there or if you're going to have 25 spectators.
Okay, thoughts?
I think it's a good idea.
Zoom's good.
All right. So I think consensus is up to 2 interviews per day. We may choose to interview 3. I wouldn't think we would interview less than 3. What are your thoughts about how many we should interview?
I think if you have 4 or 5 good candidates, you take a look at all of them. If you only have 3 good candidates, you look at 3 of them. Team members, we've had both situations. I don't know if you're not really going to consider them, I don't know if you give them an interview. I think sometimes though you have to be aware that some people withdraw from the process, and that's something to have in the back of your mind. So if you're only going with 2 or 3, if 1 withdraws, you're looking at a smaller number. Your finalists could be 2 then.
I think 3 to 5 is 3 to 5 is a good number. See if there's a natural break on where the candidates fall, but 3 to 5 I think is a good number.
So I think you could get those interviews done in 2 days.
Okay. And if we're allowing, Monday, April the 5th could be, it's a no school day for us, or isn't it? It's a no school.
It's 5th and 6th.
Oh, we don't have school scheduled April 5th or 6th. So we could be interviewing in a time when staff and students are not in the building, which may or may not be a good thing. But we have to do it in the time that we want to do this efficiently and get done to allow our board members to do their work and to get the decision over and move on, get ready to hit the road running with our new superintendent. What are your thoughts about interviewing on a non-school day?
You're right. I think there's good things and bad things. It's always nice to walk through a school when it's in session to see how things are going when you give the candidate a tour. But it's also nice for if teachers want to sit in or staff members want to sit in, they would be available that day and be able to participate maybe to a greater extent.
Okay. So tentatively, that 5th, 6th, and or 7th could be days that we would use as interview days, one or the other, or
April 5th is Easter Monday.
Easter
I
Monday.
think you gotta watch for vacation, go
Okay.
on that. Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay, maybe
6th,
six.
6th, 7th is better. 6th, 7th. And potentially 8th as a backup, and then our work would be our board discussion work could either, by your timeline would be then the following day, 8th, 9th, or Friday the 9th.
I think you could do it after the last interview, but I also think if you have people that are giving tours of the community and people that are giving tours of the school, it's nice to visit with them before you make your decision. They're going to get some time with the candidate and they may have some information they want to share with you before you make your decision. You would hate to make your decision and have one of them come in afterward and say, I wish you would have visited with me. So I think you want to, it doesn't have to be long, but at least give them an opportunity to share anything they learned. And then you could maybe even make your decision that night. You again would decide where you're going to go. And then when they interview, we usually talk to them as they're leaving and find out their impressions. Are you still interested? Is this still something that you see as a fit for you and your family? And we talk to them that if they're not interested, we would like them to withdraw before an offer is made, just so that it's a cleaner process.
Okay, so what I'm jotting down here is interviews, the 6th, 7th, and or 8th, and decision, final contract, and announce superintendent 8th, 9th, Thursday, Friday, depending on the schedule of interviewing. Does that fit with what everybody else's consensus is?
And then our regular school board meeting is the 13th.
April the 13th. Okay, looks like good timing. So then we've gotten to the end of the proposed timeline. Are there any questions, comments from the board or from our Dakota leadership team that we haven't covered? You will be helping us with crafting the questions and the structure of the interview,
Yes.
and also assisting us with negotiations with the new superintendent, which I think we pretty well handled ourselves in my previous experience. And I frankly would welcome some assistance with that.
Well,
go ahead.
because for a range that we're gonna advertise, and then we have to narrow it down before, so they're gonna have to accept before they know where they're at.
Well, okay, so Brian and I had a discussion about that. Craig had suggested strongly to me, and I think the board, that he strongly urged us to advertise a range. Dakota leadership wasn't so convinced that we need to advertise the salary range. Let's have that conversation. Is that important to the board? Is that important?
Well, just in our discussions a little bit, sometimes you may have applicants that are already working within that range. For example, if I was a superintendent in another school district and you put a range out there of 110 to 130, I may be making 125. Do I still apply? So there's the other side of that too. I mean, some applicants they could be principals, and you put that range out there and that's going to that may get them interested too. Because they know automatically that they're going to have a significant raise sometimes. Team members?
With your example, do you think there's a lot of superintendents that are looking for a switch without a big raise?
They may be looking just for a different, just for a job change. There could be some looking for that, but most of the time, if you're a superintendent and you apply somewhere else, part of that is probably a pay raise.
You know, and this is Nancy. I think too, it might be, we may get more applicants without a range in there, but also they will usually have a conversation with one of us during the application process if we know what the range is, you know, so I think there could be some benefits to not putting it in.
But then you need to know what our range is in advance, and we haven't had that conversation. I mean, you can't tell them the range is 140 to 165 if we haven't told you that. So at what point are you wanting us to specify our range? Right now?
I think what we've been doing and what we've done in our previous sites is we say the current superintendent is making this, and that, you know, and when we say, you know, obviously you're not probably going to go 30-40,000 above that or 30-40,000 below that. But to me, that's kind of the range you're looking at. If somebody says, if they're what they would need is a little higher than that, you could say, you know, if you're the right person, I think we could probably get there. And that's kind of what we've been doing. We're not making any promises, but you kind of an idea of the range you're at or the area you're at.
And that's right. Right, Mike, thank you. And that's what I was thinking. We can give them that general information where you're currently at.
Yeah, with this much experience with Craig at 4 years.
Correct.
He's in his sixth.
6 years. So just, yeah,
fifth
you're making
year.
this at this many years, someone with 15, 20 years, we probably look at it a little different. I think that's not a bad idea.
And if they don't have the experience similar to Craig, then they probably wouldn't be at that same pay scale. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? So we're not, the consensus I'm hearing is that we would not advertise the position with a specific range from 120 to 45, 50, whatever. But we would, our position would be, here's what our current superintendent is making in terms of base salary, TFFR, other benefits. And you should expect, any applicant should expect to be in that range or in that area or above based on their experience. If they're working as a principal at 80 to 90,000, they could be expecting a significant raise. However, they would have no superintendent experience, so that might keep them near the low end. On the other hand, if they're a superintendent with 5 years of experience at a smaller school, this might be an increase for them as well, and they would get credit, so to speak, for years of superintendent experience and being near that or higher.
Correct.
But typically, nobody's going to apply if they don't think it's going to be a step up in compensation, unless they're very unhappy where they are.
What, you have 2 current openings now. How did you advertise those?
I think
Depending upon experience. Salary depending upon experience. And the one thing that I think we talked about in both those positions is to the board, I wouldn't plan on saving any money. It's not unusual to hire somebody new and even with a little less experience and have to pay just as much as you were paying just because of the market. That's what's happening. And, you know, there's certain portions of the state that pay a lot better than other portions of the state. But as they look to move, you know, sometimes you have to compete with that. Otherwise, you really do limit your applicant pool.
And how has your applicant pool been in your 2 current searches using this strategy?
I think in Hatton, we ended up with 15 applicants. In Park River, we don't close until Friday. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, haven't been in there in a day or 2, but I think we had 9 right now. And part of that is location. It's Hatton is a little maybe more appealing because it's closer to Grand Forks for some of our applicants. As we call around and we try to recruit and try to get people to apply. And Park River is a bigger school. It pays better, but it's a little farther away from Grand Forks.
How would you assess Oaks as a location and as a district having a positive reputation of a place to come to?
I think Oaks is, I mean, being down in Gwinner and Milner, I'd say I have nothing but great. When I think of Oaks, I think of a great school district. I mean, it really is a great school district. You have a nice track record with superintendents. There are places where superintendents turn over every 3-4 years. Oaks has I mean, your superintendents, Josh has left, Craig's left, but they're leaving on their own accord. They're not being, they're not leaving under duress. So I think that, and I think with your opening, we certainly are going to advertise it in South Dakota as well with your proximity to the border. So I don't know what your applicant pool will look like. I think Lisbon had what, 10 or 11, if I'm right, or 12?
I think he told me 13, but I'm thinking that includes those that were probably not to be considered. So. And Lisbon is, you know, fairly comparable. They're a little bit bigger. They're a, you know, few miles closer to Fargo, which is probably a positive for some folks, but I would think, and I believe they're making their decision on Thursday. They're interviewing 3 or have interviewed 2 and will interview their 3rd on Thursday. Do you have something, Robert?
No.
Okay, so I believe the action item we should do here is to approve the timeline with the changes that we have made, which would be, again, opening the position tomorrow, tentative on-site day to be March 5th, March 26th, the closing date, March 30th, executive session to review candidate packets, April 6th through 8th, interview dates for perhaps 3 to 5 candidates, and 8th, 9th, decision-making and negotiation with the selected applicants.
So having it open for a little over a month, is that enough time?
Did you hear the question, Brian? Sheila asked if a month is adequate time to get to get the sufficient applicants.
I think it's the minimum, yes. So I think we're cutting it a little short, but I think that's the timeline. You know, like we talked earlier, we're running into Easter there. So either with Easter or after Easter. Mike or Paul, Nancy?
I think a month will work. It's the standard time frame. I think you're right. It's more on the minimum side, but it seems to be more the standard.
And how would you say, does the education, the administrative community in North Dakota know about this already?
Yes, I think the word has probably traveled through the ranks of North Dakota, so most of them already know there's an opening in Oaks.
So even though it hasn't been officially opened, we've accepted the letter of resignation of our superintendent. We've engaged a search firm. I mean, people know that. And one could say that they've been aware that it's been open for a week already.
Yes. Not officially, but yes, people, superintendents are aware of this position, yes.
All right. We can continue to discuss. Would someone like to move the adoption of or the approval of the amended timeline? And again, we can discuss and change, but let's have a motion, please.
Make a motion to accept the amended approved timeline.
Schmitz moved to approve the amended timeline, which April had put up on the board earlier. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thorpe seconds. All right, any discussion? Please do step up if you have reservations, concerns, questions.
I don't have any reservations. The question that was earlier, what is the I understand the normal model is always, principal, superintendent. What is the actual requirements if we were to entertain somebody that is not a principal or previous superintendent? What is the criteria that we're requiring?
What requirements do we have? Perhaps we should have had our superintendent job description in front of us, and that brings up another question related, because you said you'll advertise in South Dakota as well. And an administrator in South Dakota does not necessarily hold a North Dakota administrative credential. A principal in North Dakota does not necessarily hold a superintendent credential, but that doesn't mean they can't get a provisional and move into that in short order. Can you help us understand that, please?
Go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna turn it over to Paul. He's moved states a couple of times. He probably can answer that better than I can, but.
To get a license between states is not a big deal. Just there's reciprocal licenses. They'll give you a provisional for a couple of years. Every state has its little quirks where they want you to complete this class or do that, but it's nothing major. People can get that. And part of what we do when we meet with the stakeholders is we ask them if it's important to you that the person has administrative experience, specifically superintendent experience. And also, is it important that they come from North Dakota? So those are questions that are asked and on that survey. So when we bring it back to you, you'll be able to see what the stakeholders say that, yes, this is important. But typically, to be a superintendent, you're supposed to be an administrator or a principal for 3 years before you get that. However, there are some loopholes where you could go right from teacher to superintendent with a provisional. But again, the standard way is 3 years as a principal to move up to superintendent and some additional coursework.
What we have on record right now for a job description. So the qualifications only state that they need a teacher's license and superintendent credentials.
And when we vet those candidates, what we'll do is if all the groups say they want to make sure that they've been a previous superintendent, then we'd vet them according to that. Now, in the past, the criteria has been they just wanted administrative experience. So those who were just teachers were kind of put in the other pile because they weren't qualified according to the specifications that we had from the surveys. And that's how we did it in the past, and I'm assuming that's how we would do it in this case as well.
It is, so teaching, because have you ever had non-teaching? I mean, superintendent is more of an administrative instead of teaching. Has there ever been a superintendents with business administration experience without the teaching side?
I believe state law requires that they have a teaching license. And so they would have to have a teaching license to get that administrative or that superintendent credential.
That being said, there are some alternate ways to get a teaching license. You can get a teaching license without having an education major. There are alternative ways to get certified, but you do need that teaching license.
Along with the superintendent credential.
Is it important to our board that they already have a superintendent credential or not? I mean, many logical applicant would be an experienced principal that would not have a superintendent credential already. No, I'm sure we got some good candidates.
I wouldn't make that decision right away because you might limit your applicant pool. You know, you might wait and see and then see what comes out back on those surveys as well.
Good. All right. Thoughts? All right. Any other questions or discussion? Anything you want to add? I have 2 principals and an administrative assistant in the room. Is this timeline, do you have any concerns with this timeline from your perspective? No, they're all shaking their heads. No, they don't have any concerns with this timeline. All right. Hearing that, if no further questions or discussion, All those in favor of approving the revised timeline? Okay, one more look at it, please. If April can find it.
I'm still at it. Figure out which Zoom I want to be in. There you go.
All right, the draft timeline is before you. Approving today, opening tomorrow, March 5th, alternate date 9th, for Dakota leadership to be on site. Position closing on Friday, March the 26th. Applicants screened on in executive session on Tuesday, March 29th. Special board meeting, March 30th. I don't think that's.
The 29th, I think, is a Monday. So I think, oh, so I need to put this as the 30th.
Okay, good catch. March 30th is screening day. Yeah, March 30th, not 29th. So 29th is deleted. Special board meeting. There we go. Okay. And then April 6th, 7th, 8th, interviews of 3 to 5 applicants, up to 2 per day. And 8th and 9th, decision negotiation contract and announcement. And our regular school board meeting is April 13th, just as a matter of information, not really part of the superintendent timeline, but could be cleaning up any loose ends by that time. And position begins under contract on July 1. All right, any further discussion or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The motion carries and the timeline is adopted. One question, what else, if anything, does our team need from the board or from April or anyone else?
You know, one thing that we will ask from April is a copy of Craig's contract. We can get that at a later date.
Okay.
And then we want to make a nice flyer up for you guys to advertise on Facebook and social media. If you could send us some just pictures of your school, of students and stuff, I would talk to your yearbook advisor. I'm guessing they've got a ton of them on file. Make sure that you don't give us pictures of any students who haven't agreed to have their name or who've asked for privacy. But if you could send those to Brian, we'll get those put together in a nice marketable flyer.
I think
We're working on
April
it.
has Marie working on that for us. She does a lot of the photos for our social media, and she'll come up with and a couple things that we've discussed between us in emails and things is what sorts of things we need to feature and highlight about Oaks Public Schools. And the one thing I noticed was missing was our close relationship with the Southeast Region Career and Technical Center as a wonderful asset and partnership that we have. We talked about our PCBL initiative as something we're in the midst of and very highly invested in. Facilities, our building will soon be 100 years old, the one, our high school building, but we've got a 5-year facilities plan to, address any concerns and keep it up and fresh. So we've got a variety of ages of facilities. So it still looks pretty good, I think, for an almost 100-year-old building.
Anya, before we send out that flyer, once we get the pictures and we create the flyer, we'll send it back to your final approval. to
Okay,
April,
very good.
And then we'll get it out.
Okay.
One other thing is I'll work with April and your administrators to start making plans for March 5th.
Okay. Anything else, board members? The clock is almost at 8 o'clock. That's our witching hour. All right. Thank you all, gentlemen and lady, for coming with us this early morning meeting. Thank you all board members for your diligent work on this in April. Our work is done, I think. Yeah, it's done for now. Now you have to earn your fees. I'll sign your contract before I leave here today. With that, I will adjourn this meeting at 8 a.m. Thank you.
Thank you.